states-funded governance assessment recommends that the People's Progressive Party and a Partnership for National Unity share political power. A former Indigenous Peoples Ministerial Advisor is objecting to Vice President Barajagdio's claims about Amerindian rights to minerals. Labour and workplace safety officers have started inspecting vessels that are producing and exploring for oil. Regionally, Antigua and Barbuda. The police in Antigua and Barbuda are complaining about bad conditions of work. Barbados ends its COVID curfew from today. We'll have this and international news from the BBC in a moment.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return to work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner, with results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-7233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
And now, the news in detail. A democracy and governance assessment prepared for the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, says Guyana's two major political parties need to engage in power sharing. The 2021 assessment says the People's Progressive Party and a Partnership for National Unity plus Alliance for Change need to move away from the current winner-take-all system. The USAID-funded report states that power sharing will ensure that the unprecedented wealth in oil reserves can be transparently and equitably managed for the benefit of all Guyanese. According to the assessment, the National Assembly, a possible mechanism for initiating reform discussions and formalizing power sharing, has been combative at best. The document states that inequitable distribution of oil wealth will exacerbate the deep disparities between regions and ethnic groups, so social protection and cash transfers will become important for the country's poorest and most vulnerable. The Democracy and Governance Assessment recalls that the 2020 parliamentary sessions commenced with parliamentarians trading verbal personal insults rather than engaging in civilized discourse on matters of national importance. While parliamentary decision-making can promote consensus building and compromise, the assessment finds that it only worsens the political divide. The USAID assessment states that the tremendous influx of money opens many avenues for corruption. Further, it notes that any lack of transparency and public engagement could undermine trust in public institutions. A former Indigenous Peoples Ministerial Advisor, Mervyn Williams, has dismissed claims by Vice President Barajagdio that Amerindian people enjoy the rights to minerals. In an interview with the United States-based Vice News, Mr. Jagdio had said that the Amerindian Act provides for Amerindians to have subsurface rights.
We're one of the few countries in the world that gave the Amerindian communities on tidal lands subsurface rights. So they had rights over the forest, but never the mineral below ground. So now they have subsurface rights in as part of the legislation that we passed.
But Mr. Williams, who was advisor to the then Minister of Indigenous Peoples Affairs, said that such rights had been long advocated for, but the State Lands Act was never amended, and the Amerindian Act of 2006 does not allow for the much desired right to subsurface minerals. Mr. Williams, who is a member of the People's National Congress Reform, says it cannot be fair to cause Guyana's international partners to believe that Indigenous citizens here enjoy a right which they do not and have never enjoyed. He argues that the PPP is avoiding a national review of the Amerindian Act because of the strong advocacy for subsurface rights, among other things, which he believes the PPP is unwilling to grant. Minister of Labour Joseph Hamilton says Labour and Occupational Safety and Health officers have started inspecting oil-producing and other vessels that are working offshore Guyana. He says this is to ensure that ExxonMobil and other companies that are working in the oil sector obey Guyana's labour and safety laws. The Minister of Labour says the oil company will be paying for visits to the floating, production, storage and offloading vessels, as well as ships that are working offshore. He says that ExxonMobil pays for transporting the officers.
All I can say to you, that the arrangement I have with ExxonMobil to ensure that regularly my officers can go on the FPSOs and whatever vessels out there, is that it has no cost to the Ministry of Labour.
The Minister of Labour says Labour officers will be visiting those vessels once per month. Mr. Hamilton says only 2 Guyanese are trained in inspecting the floating production, storage and offloading vessels. The number of Labour officers has been increased from 16 to 26, and occupational safety and health officers have been increased from 9 to 30. Article 13, a Guyanese, the pro-inclusionary democracy organization, is taking the government to task for removing Dr. Rudy Jadupat as the coordinator of the Guyana Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative. The Ministry of Natural Resources has claimed that Dr. Jadupat was a member of the Alliance for Change who had been handpicked by the then David Granger-led government. But the AFC and Dr. Jadupat have denied separately that he was a member of that party. Article 13 says it is perplexed at the Ministry's Natural Resources citing Dr. Jadupat's perceived political association as a reason for removing him from the post. That organization says the resonance with the days of the party card is frightening and completely unacceptable. According to Article 13, it is ironic that Dr. Jadupat is being replaced by Dr. Prem Nazir, a known People's Progressive Party associate. Against that background, Article 13 is calling on the civil society representatives of the multi-stakeholder group, which oversees the work of the EITI Secretariat, to reconsider their participation in the MSG as offering legitimacy to a compromised organization. Barbados' Prime Minister Mia Mottley arrived in Guyana last night, and she is expected to hold talks with President Irfan Ali. Those talks are expected to be ahead of her speaking at the opening of the Guyana International Energy Conference. She will also hold discussions with the President of Suriname, Chandrika Prasad Santokhi, and the President of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo. They will also be participating in the Energy Conference. The Barbadian leader was greeted on arrival by a team of government ministers led by Prime Minister Mark Phillips. The governor of Rotary District 7030, Sonia Aline, says Caribbean peoples need to take decisive action against non-communicable diseases. Ms. Aline yesterday participated in the Rotary Club of Georgetown Central's commissioning of its Fitness Corner, a healthy lifestyles project in the national park. Speaking with Newstalk Radio Guyana shortly after the event, she explained how the project forms part of Rotary's fight in the Caribbean against hypertension, diabetes, heart ailments, and other non-communicable diseases.
The Caribbean is known for its high rates of NCDs, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart, all of that. So Rotary, being the leaders that we are, we really tried to think of a project that all could be involved in. And childhood obesity became the buzzword because we know that we can change children and children influence adults. So we really thought about it. Our past district governor, Lyle Chase, the governor before me, it was his plan, together with our chair, Virginia Assen-Oostenberg from Suriname. And it has really taken off because we recognize that we have a problem and we want to change.
The governor of Rotary District 7030 says steps are being taken to formally approach the 15-nation Caribbean community on the fight against non-communicable diseases. While Ms. Allen believes that Caribbean health ministers are making progress in addressing such diseases, she says Caribbean people must take the lead in changing their lifestyles.
While the ministers of health have done sufficient, it's not just a government thing. It's an individual person in the Caribbean for us to just really take hold of our lives. We are in charge of our lives, and we must make the governments see that we're serious about this. When they see we're serious, they're going to take us seriously.
Sonia Allen, the governor of Rotary District 7030, which is made up of more than 2,000 Rotarians in 73 clubs in 17 countries and territories in the Southern Caribbean. Now for regional news. St. Kitts and Nevis Attorney General Vincent Byron Jr. says the Electoral Commission of that Twin Island Federation has recommended the counting of votes at polling stations. Currently, at the close of the poll, the ballots are taken to a central location where they are counted. But Win FM reports that Mr. Byron Jr. says the proposal to count the votes at polling stations, as well as several other ideas, are to be taken to Cabinet and eventually Parliament. The Attorney General recently met with the Electoral Commission and the Supervisor of Elections. The Attorney General says centralised counting of ballots has been causing delays and there is greater need for a number of logistical arrangements such as security. The Attorney General indicated that there are other recommendations made by the Electoral Commission that need to be formalised and will then be announced to the public in detail. Antigua and Barbuda's Police Welfare Association, PWA, has lodged a scathing rebuke of the police hierarchy and the government for their apparent lack of attention to the needs of the police force. In 2019, the PWA took the hierarchy to task over a number of issues, to include unsanitary working conditions at the various police stations across the island, the lack of uniforms, accessibility to housing and lands, medical insurance and risk allowance for officers. And almost 3 years later, several of these issues, like risk allowance and medical insurance, despite recent commitments by the Minister of Justice and Legal Affairs, Stedroy Benjamin, have yet to be resolved. Although commendations were given recently for the newly refurbished Parham Police Station, Chairman of the PWA, Corporal Marlon Harris, while speaking exclusively to Observer Media, referred to the structure as a slap in the face to her body as the proposed plans that were agreed upon were not carried out. She says work done on the Parham Police Station was merely the adding of plywood to the barrack room and calling it a police station. She says the PWA had negotiated for new stations at Parham, All Saints and Botans, as well as Barbuda, which has been without station since 2017 after the passage of Hurricane Irma. Police Commissioner Atlee Rodney had, however, announced at the handing over ceremony of the Parham Police Station that the focus will now turn to the Bolans Police Station. The 12-hour shifts, the PWA reiterated, is still another area of concern that has not been addressed. While the body has not announced protest action over the outstanding grievances, the executive members are saying they have had enough. Barbados is ending its curfew today, and authorities say that is one of several indicators that the Caribbean island is moving towards the stage of living with COVID-19 for the long haul. A new directive will be in place on that day for 2 weeks. The curfew, which ran from midnight to 5 a.m. daily, the latest of several revisions, will be discontinued. Minister of Health and Wellness Ian Gooding-Edgehill says the changes came after a meeting of the Emergency Operations Centre, EOC, last Wednesday and were on the recommendations of the CMO. He says the advice of the Emergency Operations Centre has always been based on the science and an understanding that Barbados has to embrace economic and social recovery in order to sustain growth and development. He said the Ministry of Health thinks the Omicron outbreak has peaked and the numbers are falling. Approximately 15% of people tested daily do not have COVID. In Brazil, a man was shot dead during a riot at the weekend after trouble broke out among Palmeiras fans who had watched their team lose to English club Chelsea in the final of the FIFA Club World Cup. The man, who police said was an off-duty prison guard, was shot outside Palmeiras Stadium in São Paulo, where thousands of fans had gathered to watch the match on big screens. Riot police used tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse the crowds. One man was arrested, the statement said. Police say images will be analysed to identify others involved in the riots. Police continue to patrol the area to prevent any new disturbances. Chelsea beat the Copa Libertadores champions 2-1 after extra time in the game in Abu Dhabi. Palmeiras were aiming to win the annual tournament for the first time and joined state rivals Corinthians, Santos and São Paulo, all of whom have won the trophy, played between the top sides in the world. And now for international news, we join the BBC World Service.
BBC News. Hello, this is Jerry Smith. The Russian teenager Kamila Valieva has been cleared to continue competing in the individual figure skating competition at the Beijing Olympics, despite having failed a drug test in December. The test result was only revealed during the Games after Valieva won the team gold with the Russian squad. Laura Scott is in Beijing.
Following a near 6-hour hearing that finished in the early hours of this morning in Beijing, the Court of Arbitration for Sport has ruled that the teenage figure skating prodigy Kamila Valieva can take her place in tomorrow's individual women's event, where she is favourite for gold. The 15-year-old has returned to the ice for practice following the decision, but this doping controversy that has overshadowed the Games shows no signs of abating. The US Olympic and Paralympic Committee's chief executive called the decision disappointing, saying it appears to be another chapter in the systemic and pervasive disregard for clean sport by Russia.
The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has arrived in Kyiv for talks with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in the latest diplomatic effort to diffuse tension in the region. He will meet President Putin in Moscow on Tuesday in an attempt to prevent a Russian invasion of Ukraine. This Kyiv resident told the BBC of her fears.
In my mind, I think everyone is going through just do I have enough money just in case? If I need to leave the city urgently, what should I take? Should I have my case prepared overnight, or how fast can I move out of the house if there will be an airstrike, or where is the nearest bomb shelter? And there's very little information on that, unfortunately.
The busiest border crossing between Canada and the US has reopened after protesters blockaded it for nearly a week. Truck drivers opposed to COVID restrictions had led the protest at the Ambassador Bridge. The White House welcomed the Canadian authorities' action to end the protest, saying it had damaged livelihoods on both sides of the border. Schools in the southern Indian state of Karnataka have partially reopened 4 days after they were ordered to close by the state government because of a row over Muslim pupils wearing headscarves in the classroom. The authorities have stepped up security around the schools. Divya Arya reports from Udupi.
There are restrictions on gatherings and demonstrations outside schools as they reopen till grade 10 across Karnataka. Students of grades 11 and 12 from a school in the coastal city Udupi were the first to raise the demand to wear hijabs inside their classroom. Their appeal is now being heard in the Karnataka High Court after talks with school and government fell through. Meanwhile, the demand spread across colleges and non-Muslim students wore saffron scarves, a symbol of Hinduism, in protest. Karnataka government shut schools and colleges last week to quell the unrest.
BBC News. The Mauritian flag has been raised for the first time on the Chagos Islands in the Indian Ocean. The Mauritian ambassador to the United Nations led a ceremony. The islands are controlled by Britain but claimed by Mauritius. The flag raising was the culmination of a trip organised by the Mauritian government, which included a group of Chagosians who were evicted from the islands by the British government 50 years ago. Police in Paris have shot dead a man who attacked them with a knife at the Gare du Nord station. The French Transport Minister said the incident was not thought to be terrorism-related. 2 police officers were slightly injured. The Gare du Nord is one of Europe's biggest railway stations and hosts international train services. The film director and producer Ivan Reitman, whose films include Ghostbusters and Twins, has died. He was 75. Sancha Berg looks back at his life.
Ivan Reitman was born in 1946 in what is now Slovakia. When he was 4, his family fled, smuggled out in the hold of a Danube river barge. He grew up in Canada, studied music and drama, made short films. Reitman's big break came in 1978 when he produced National Lampoon's Animal House. He made many more successful comedies, including Twins and Kindergarten Cop with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Sancha Berg. At the Winter Olympics, the French ice dance pair Gabriela Papadakis and Guillaume Cizeron have won the gold medal, after earlier receiving a world record score in the rhythm dance section. In the women's single bobsleigh event, the winner was Kaylee Humphries, who only became a US citizen in December. The 36-year-old won 2 gold medals for Canada at previous Olympics. She switched nationality after filing a harassment complaint against the Canadian bobsleigh team. BBC News.
And that's the news to the moment.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
Now to end the news, a look at the lead stories once again. A United States-funded governance assessment recommends that the People's Progressive Party and a Partnership for National Unity share political power. A former Indigenous Peoples Ministerial Advisor is objecting to Vice President Barajagdio's claims about Amerindian rights to minerals. Labour and workplace safety officers have started inspecting vessels that are producing and exploring for oil. Regionally, Antigua and Barbuda's police are complaining about bad conditions of work. Barbados ends its COVID curfew from today. The news came to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.